when it comes to something like archetypes, that probably, a word that a lot of people haven't heard yet before. How do you define it, and what do you mean by kind of the work that you found around archetypes?
Well, archetypal psychology has been around for about 50 years. My partner in the work, Lawrence Hillman, is actually the son of James Hillman, the founder of archetypal psychology. So we started a little club many years ago called The Sun Also Rises, because we were both kind of
Nice
overshadowed
one.
by our dads in different ways. And we put our sort of knowledge together. My work of being able to activate desired futures, which is what mythodrama is about. It's about acting in your desired future. And his expertise as an archetypal coach. And the archetypes are underlying patterns of human nature and culture. It's like on the surface, what we show to the world is our personality. Right. And then underneath that, we could talk about our psychology, what happened to me as a child, or what my kind of natural passions are. Underneath the psychology, there's a deeper layer that is archetypal, that preexists anyone's individual, birth or life, that are patterns that go throughout time and throughout history. And the patterns, different cultures will kind of prioritize different archetypal patterns. Archetypes have many different guises. They used to be known as gods. Gods, goddesses, they were the great mythic figures in all the great mythology of the world. These are archetypal figures. The Romans and Greeks had them. The Romans started connecting these archetypes with gods and planets, so that Mars became both the warrior god and the planet Mars. Venus became the goddess of love as well as the planet Venus. So these archetypes have been with us forever. And I think since the first cave painting, since the first creative expressions of human consciousness, we created typologies and types. Now the archetypes are very deep. A stereotype is superficial, kind of two-dimensional, whereas an archetype is almost four-dimensional. It exists through time and space. But of course, in every age, and we would argue in every individual, it has its own unique expression. So we never become an archetype. It's like we use an archetypal energy which expresses itself through our body in different ways.
Perhaps before you show us more about how you apply archetypes, I'm curious as to where you think the origin story, if you like, or the teleology, of kind of where the archetypes come from, because it's easy to sort of spot them after the fact and go, okay, this is a storyteller or a creator, or one of the archetypes based on what they exhibit in their traits. But do you think that it comes from something else, perhaps somewhere deeper in our nature? Feel free to speculate, but maybe it kind of crosses over into the realm of belief, but I'm not sure. But where does that originate from? Is that something in our DNA? Is that something in the kind of the spiritus mundi, or how do you derive
so. I think pretty close. I don't think you can prove anything about archetypes. For me, they're underlying patterns. Yeah, so it's not something that you can put a rubber stamp on, but it's something you feel when you're in the presence of. And that's what it is. It's a felt reality. And we can define them in lots of different ways, but we've found a way to define the archetypes in a set of 10 archetypes that for us encompasses all the energies that you need to work with in your life to be an effective agent for your purpose. And indeed, we would argue that it is your archetypal pattern that will deeply inform your purpose in the world. So understanding your archetypal pattern can help you guide people towards their purpose. And particularly when we work with mentors and with leaders, understanding your archetypal pattern is key part of figuring out your purpose. So the The set of archetypes that we use, which again, the research, Lawrence has been working, my partner in the work, for 40 years with archetypes, and he feels this is a complete enough set of 10 archetypes that can be divided into 5 realms. And in the leadership work, we call these leadership realms. Order, which is how we organize things; relationship, how we relate to others; creativity, how we innovate; change, how we manage transitions; and action, how we get things done. So 5 realms, 10 archetypes, so 2 in each. So if we start and just go round in the realm of order, this archetype of the sovereign is the one that is deeply connected to vision and purpose. The sovereign is about the why. It's the part of us that is willing to be visible when we know what we're standing up for. And the sovereign part of us will organize ourselves and our lives around vision. So the why is kind of central to the sovereign. The strategist, another equally important part of us, is more about structure and mastery, more about the roadmap. So the sovereign tends to be slightly more heartfelt and courageous. The strategist more mindful and logical in its approach to creating order. In relationship, we have the nurturer and the lover, where the nurturer is the kind of parental archetype of care and empathy and development. A lot of people in therapy, a lot of the more caring people in human resources have nurturer as a leading archetype. That often people are kind of guided, their purpose will be in caring professions if they have nurturer as a leading archetype, or they will be someone who offers care within another kind of organization. Whereas the lover creates relationship through desire and beauty. The lover creates equal relationships, sociability, what business terms now is called developing social capital, a very capitalist expression for a beautiful archetype. But there we go. We need some functionality somewhere. So the lover will create great brands. You know, Apple as a brand has a lot of lover energy in it versus, you know, Microsoft when Apple first came out. And the people, that the idea that, you know, that you're worth it, self-worth often has a big part in the lover archetype, whereas the nurturer might be much more focused on giving to others. And eventually, often you hear the phrase, you know, who cares for the carers, because they can burn out in helping others. The lover will tend to have a better sense of self-worth and what they need. In creativity, we have the dreamer and the storyteller as 2 complementary but different archetypes, where the dreamer is the part of us that can be inspired by things in our imagination. So inspiration and imagination. A lot of entrepreneurs who will listen to the podcast will probably be familiar with that idea that a notion kind of lodges itself in your head before it's logical, before a product exists. For me, it happened that dreamer's a big part of my archetypal pattern and always has been. The word mythodrama appeared in my journal 4 years before I did the first mythodrama event. But it just occurred, and it was like, that's something, I've got to catch that, I've got to put it down. The dreamer gives us intuitions of the future. Or if we listen to the dreamer part of us, we can sometimes hear the whispers of the future talking to us. So it's not logical, it's not strategic. It is in entering into dreamland, but ultimately with a creative purpose. Whereas the storyteller, again, is often the more logical part of creativity, about communication and synthesis. So communication, where have we been? Where are we now? Where are we going? The kind of narrative thread that can hold people and nations together and give us a sense of where we're going for individual teams, you know, organizations and cultures.
That was my one when I took the assessment yesterday. I'll make sure the assessment link goes into the show notes as well. I'm sure some people
Yeah,
would be
we have
very
a
keen.
little free assessment, 50 questions, where you get your top archetype and your bottom. And usually the top one is spot on. The bottom one can be slightly adaptable depending on circumstances, but the top one is very often your core. I test the Explorer as my top, and then in the more detailed analysis we do, the Dreamer is almost always my number two.
Mm.
So the storyteller, then the synthesis, the making connections, the building networks, so it's perfect for the humble mind, that everything you do is in service of a network, connecting people, connecting ideas, putting ideas together.
Yep.
Classic gifts of the storyteller, kind of on purpose and on song. In the realm of change, we have the renegade and the transformer, which both want change, but they do it in a very different pace. So the renegade connected to invention and disruption, and that disruption can feel very uncomfortable to others around them when the renegade creates things. If you think of a lot of the new IT, what artificial intelligence is doing right now to the world, that's renegade technology. It's kind of creating a revolution.
Mm.
And what's happening now, like to people who make videos, having just heard that there's a video GBT app coming out. I mean, that's renegade disruption. Renegade disruption for sure. But the renegade is another part of us that can see the future, that can just sense that this isn't working anymore, and kind of like the old Zuckerberg quote, we've got to break things in order to get things moving. So they're not afraid to make people and things uncomfortable. Whereas the transformer, more about mystery and regeneration, the transformer tends to honor the natural rhythms of life and death and rebirth. So they understand that often for meaningful change to happen, things need to be buried and die as well as need to be birthed and nurtured into new being.
Interesting distinction between the two, even though they're adjacent. They're kind of quite different in the way that they pursue the same goal.
Absolutely. And the transformer is kind of more shamanic, more of the kind of magician energy around it that is willing to dig deep to understand the root causes of things. Whereas the renegade tends to just jump into the future and not worry about why things are as they are. Let's just create the future we need, and it'll take care of itself. And I definitely argue in organizations that are going through culture change, you need both. If you don't have renegades, you won't move fast enough. But if you don't have transformers, you'll definitely break too many things and probably lose too many people along the way. And then last but not least, in the realm of action, we have the warrior and the explorer. So the warrior is the part of us, the martial part of us, that can challenge inappropriate behavior, that can defend our boundaries, that is ambitious to achieve. The warrior wants a target and it wants to win. And it often has goals. The explorer is more about adventure and truth. So if the warrior has a goal, the explorer is on a quest that often doesn't have a timeline to it. It can be the inner or outer adventure. So outer adventure, climbing mountains, inner adventure, really trying to think about the meaning of life and the philosophy that I believe in. What's my philosophy of life?
Would you say Hamlet was an explorer?
Yes, for sure. His whole kind of quest for meaning, but it also meant that sometimes he perhaps didn't take action quickly enough, which is where a more activated warrior could have helped him, perhaps, to avoid a lot of the tragedy that happens in that great story. And the other side of the explorer then is truth. What's true? that social justice, those who are called to work their purpose in social justice, will often have explorer as a leading archetype. That sense of what's fair and what's unfair, and how can I do something about it. So that's then the 10 archetypes around the 5 realms. And coming back, to the original question about what does that have to do with purpose, we find that if a leader's leading archetype connects them deeply with what they do or what they believe in, they will likely feel that they are on purpose. And if we are on purpose, that brings with it lots of potential opportunities. Now, the archetype that specifically addresses purpose is sovereign, right? So the sovereign is the part of us that will help us find purpose. But that purpose might be found in any of the 10 archetypes.